The floor didn't just creak, it answered back. Caleb froze mid-step as the wood beneath his boots gave a hollow knock, too deep, too deliberate to be wrought. Rexley's claws scraped hard against the same spot, low growl building as cold air leaked up through the cracks. Then something shifted below. What do you think is under that floor? The sound didn't wake him all at once. It slid into his sleep first. Quiet, steady, wrong. Scrape, scrape, pause, scrape. Caleb Hayes's eyes opened into darkness before the rest of him caught up. No movement, no breath wasted. His body stayed exactly where it had been, flat on his back, one arm across his chest, the other already curling inward without thought, searching for a weight that hadn't been there in years. The cold hit next, thin mountain air seeping through cracked boards, the smell of old wood and dust. Then the sound came again. Scrape. Not random, not wind, not loose boards shifting in the night. Deliberate. Caleb's gaze shifted slowly toward the far side of the room. No sudden turns, no noise, just his eyes, adjusting to the dark, picking shapes out of shadow. Rexley stood there. The German shepherd's silhouette was rigid, ears forward, tail low but not tucked. His front paw lifted, then dragged across the floor again, claws catching against the warped planks. Scrape. Caleb didn't speak, didn't move. He watched. The dog wasn't panicked. No barking, no pacing, just locked in, focused on a single spot in the floor like it had insulted him. That was what made Caleb sit up, slowly. His back peeled off the sleeping bag inch by inch, careful not to shift the boards beneath him. The place was a wreck. Every step had a voice. Every loose nail had something to say. He waited between breaths, counting without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. No change outside. No crunch of gravel. No engine. No wind pushing against the walls. Just Rexley. And that sound. Scrape. Caleb planted his boots carefully, testing the floor before committing weight. He rose in silence, knees loose, shoulders relaxed, like he was stepping into a room he hadn't cleared yet. Old habit. Didn't go away. He crossed the space in a slow arc instead of a straight line, giving himself a wider angle on the door, the windows, the hallway behind the counter. His eyes flicked once to each point, mapping exits without thinking. Everything still. Everything empty. Except that spot. Rexley didn't look at him when he came close. Didn't break focus. The dog's nose dipped low, almost touching the wood, then lifted again, sniffing short, sharp pulls of air, tracking something that wasn't moving. Caleb crouched beside him, careful with his balance. The boards dipped slightly under his weight, but held. "What is it, boy?" he murmured, barely more than breath. Rexley's ears twitched at the sound of his voice, but his eyes stayed fixed. He pressed his paw down again, harder this time. The floor answered. A hollow knock echoed up through the wood. Not loud, but clean. Clear. Wrong. Caleb's head tilted just slightly. That wasn't rot. Rot sagged, crumbled, gave under pressure. This sounded like space. He shifted his weight forward and tapped the same spot with his knuckles. Once. A dull thud. He moved an inch to the side. Tapped again. Solid. Back to the first spot. Tap. Hollow. Caleb froze there for a second longer than necessary, his hand resting on the wood, fingers spread. He didn't like things he couldn't explain. Didn't trust them. The wind pushed faintly against the far wall, rattling something loose in the distance. A soft clatter echoed down the hallway behind the counter. Caleb's head snapped up, eyes narrowing, body already angled toward the sound before his thoughts caught up. Nothing followed. Silence returned. Rexley didn't even flinch, still focused. Caleb exhaled slowly through his nose and looked back down. The boards here were older than the rest, darker grain, edges worn smoother, like something had passed over them too many times to count. But the nails didn't match. He ran a thumb across one of them. Different metal, less rust. Replaced. At some point. "Someone's been in here," he whispered. Rexley's tail gave a single, slow sweep across the floor. Caleb leaned closer, bringing his ear down near the wood. He pressed his palm flat beside it and knocked again, softer this time. Tap. The sound traveled, not just down, outward, like it had somewhere to go. A space beneath. His jaw tightened. Places like this didn't come with surprises. Not the kind that stayed hidden this long. Not in a building everyone in the county had written off as worthless. He shifted back onto his heels and scanned the room again, slower this time. Not just checking, studying. The ticket counter, the broken benches, the old lantern hooks along the wall, everything exactly where it had been when he walked in days ago. Untouched. So why hide something here? And why now? Rexley finally looked up at him. Not confused, not anxious. Waiting. Caleb held that look for a moment, something tightening in his chest that had nothing to do with the cold. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I hear it too." He placed his hand back on the floor, fingers tracing the faint seam between two planks that didn't quite sit flush. Not random, not natural. Built. The mountain wind picked up again, slipping through the cracks in the walls, carrying the faint scent of snow. Caleb sat there in the dark, hand resting over the hollow space. Rexley pressed close at his side. Neither of them moved. Because whatever was under that floor, it had been put there on purpose, and it wasn't meant to be found. Not like this. Not by him. The boards creaked softly as the temperature dropped another degree. Rexley's ears lifted again, and this time, he didn't scrape. He just stared, right at the same spot. Waiting. Caleb didn't touch the board again. Not yet. He pulled his hand back slowly, resting it on his knee, eyes still fixed on the seam in the wood. Rexley didn't move either. The dog's chest rose and fell in slow, controlled breaths, like he was holding something in place just by standing there. Caleb shifted his weight and leaned back against the wall, never turning his back on the floor. "Not tonight," he said under his breath. The words weren't for Rexley. They were for himself. Outside, the wind slid down the mountain and pressed against the old station, slipping through cracks like it knew the place better than any man. The temperature dropped fast after midnight up here. Caleb could feel it settling into his bones, dragging him back into the present, away from whatever that hollow space wanted him to do. He reached for his jacket without looking, fingers finding it by memory. Slipped it on. Kept his boots laced. He didn't sleep again. Not really. Just sat there, with Rexley beside him, both of them watching the same piece of floor like it might move if they blinked. It didn't. By the time the first gray light pushed through the broken window, the room looked smaller, safer, or maybe just easier to lie to himself about. Caleb stood, joints stiff, and stretched his back with a quiet crack. Rexley finally broke position, stepping forward to sniff the board again, slower this time. No scratching, just confirming. Caleb gave the floor one last look. Then he turned away. 3 weeks earlier, he'd been sleeping in the front seat of a truck that barely ran. Same jacket, same boots, same dog. Different kind of cold, the kind that got into your hands first, made it hard to hold on to anything for long. He remembered the gas station lights flickering overhead that night, buzzing like insects. He'd parked off to the side, far enough not to get noticed, close enough to see anyone coming. Rexley had been curled up across the passenger seat, nose tucked under his tail, breathing slow and steady. The dog slept like he trusted the world. Caleb didn't. Didn't matter how long it had been. Didn't matter that there were no mountains there, no patrol routes, no radios cracking in his ear. A car door slammed somewhere in the distance, and Caleb's body reacted before his mind did. His hand moved, fast, automatic, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Never was. Not anymore. He froze halfway through the motion, fingers curling into empty air. Then slowly, he pulled his hand back. Rexley didn't wake. Caleb leaned his head against the steering wheel and closed his eyes, counted his breathing. 1, 2, 3. The same way he used to when things got loud, when the dark felt too close, when the ground under him didn't feel solid. He opened his eyes and looked at the crumpled envelope sitting on the dashboard. Cash inside. $112. He'd counted it 3 times already. Didn't change. Didn't stretch. Didn't solve anything. The next morning, he followed a paper sign taped crookedly to a wooden post near the county road. Tax auction today. Black letters. Faded edges. The courthouse was smaller than he expected. A handful of trucks outside. Men in work boots. A couple of women with clipboards. People who knew what they were doing. Caleb didn't. He stood near the back, Rexley sitting close at his leg, watching. Properties flashed on a screen at the front. Land, sheds, old houses. Numbers climbed fast. Thousands, sometimes more. Caleb didn't raise his hand once. Didn't have the money. Didn't have the plan. Then the man at the front cleared his throat and flipped to the next listing. Property 21, he said. Abandoned stagecoach stop. Willow Creek Ridge. A photo appeared. The same building Caleb now stood inside. Even then, it looked tired. Leaning. Forgotten. The starting bid came out flat. $100. Silence followed. A few men shifted in their seats. One of them chuckled under his breath. That place won't make it through winter, someone said. Another voice, louder this time. Costs more to tear it down than it's worth. A couple of people laughed. Caleb didn't. He just stared at the screen, at the roof barely holding, at the door hanging crooked, at the land around it. Empty, quiet. Far enough from everything. A place no one wanted. A place no one would come looking. He glanced down at Rexley. The dog looked back, calm as ever, waiting. Caleb exhaled once, slow. Then he raised his hand. The room noticed that. The auctioneer nodded. 100. No one else spoke. No one else moved. Going once. A man near the front shook his head, smirking. Going twice. Someone muttered, "Kid doesn't know what he's buying." Caleb didn't correct him, didn't explain, didn't care. Sold. The sound of the gavel was sharper than it needed to be. Final. 20 minutes later, Caleb stood outside with a piece of paper in his hand and $12 left in his pocket. The clerk had given him a key that looked older than the building itself. Place has been empty a long time, she said. You'll want to be careful up there. Caleb nodded. He always was. The walk to the station took longer than expected. The road turned to dirt, then to something less than that. Trees closed in. The air thinned. Rexley stayed close the whole way. When the building finally came into view, Caleb stopped. Not because he was surprised, because he wasn't. It looked exactly like the picture. Maybe worse. He stepped forward anyway, fitted the key into the lock. It resisted at first, then gave. The door opened with a long, dry creak, like it hadn't been asked to move in years. Cool air rolled out. Dust, wood, time. Caleb stepped inside, scanning automatically. Corners, shadows, lines of sight. Clear, empty. Safe enough. Behind him, Rexley crossed the threshold without hesitation. Caleb closed the door and stood there for a second, listening to the silence settle around him. A roof overhead. 4 walls. No one watching. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't waiting for something to happen. He just had a place. Now, standing in that same place, Caleb looked back toward the section of floor where Rexley had been scratching. Morning light stretched across it, soft and harmless. Just wood, just dust, just an old building that had outlived its purpose. But Caleb knew better. He crouched again, slower this time, studying the seam, the nails, the grain. Nothing about it felt random. Nothing about it felt safe. Rexley stepped in beside him, shoulder brushing his arm. Caleb rested a hand on the dog's neck, fingers pressing lightly into thick fur. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We'll get to it. Not yet, but soon. Because whatever was under that floor, it had been waiting a long time, and now it had found them first." Caleb didn't move for a long moment after saying it. The words hung there, quiet, like something that didn't belong in daylight. Rexley shifted beside him, then turned away from the floor and walked toward the open doorway. He paused at the threshold, nose lifting, testing the air outside. Caleb stood slowly, joints tight from the cold night, and followed. The mountains spread out in front of them, tall pines, uneven ground, the narrow dirt path he'd walked in on. No movement, no sound except wind brushing through branches. Still, something felt off. Not danger. Not yet. Just awareness. Like the place had eyes. Caleb stepped off the porch and began a slow walk around the building, boots pressing into soft dirt. He didn't rush it, didn't cut corners. He gave each side its own angle, checking lines of sight the way he used to, where someone could approach unseen, where they'd be forced into the open. Old habit. Useful habit. Rexley moved ahead of him, nose low, tracing a path along the back wall. The dog stopped near a cluster of weeds pushing up against the foundation and sniffed harder, short bursts of air. Caleb crouched beside him. The soil here was disturbed, not fresh, but not old either. He brushed aside a few loose leaves with his fingers. The ground beneath was darker, packed differently than the rest. Something had been dug here before. "Not animals," Caleb muttered. Rexley huffed softly, as if agreeing. Caleb straightened and scanned the tree line again, slower this time. The ridge behind the station sloped upward, thick with brush. Anyone watching from there would have a clean view of the building. Too clean. He stepped back toward the wall and leaned just enough to change his angle, testing what someone else might see. The front door, the windows, the exact spot where the floor inside had sounded hollow. Caleb's jaw tightened. He turned away from the ridge and walked back inside. The station felt different now. Not just abandoned, occupied. Not by people, but by something left behind. He moved toward the ticket counter, eyes scanning the surfaces more carefully than before. Dust had settled unevenly. Some areas thicker, untouched. Others faintly disturbed. Not recent, but not original either. Rexley circled once and stopped near the counter, head tilting slightly. Caleb followed his gaze. A section of the wall behind the counter caught his attention, not because it stood out, but because it didn't. Too even. too clean compared to the rest of the room. He stepped closer, running his fingers lightly along the wood. The paint had long since peeled away, but beneath it, the grain told a different story. Different boards. Replaced at some point. He tapped it once. Solid. He tapped lower. Same. Then he moved to the side and tapped again. A faint change. Not hollow like the floor, but not quite right either. Caleb stepped back, letting the pieces sit where they were. No forcing it. No rushing. He'd learned that the hard way. Rexley moved again, this time toward a corner near the old benches. He sniffed along the baseboard, then looked back at Caleb briefly before continuing. Leading. Caleb watched him go, then turned his attention to the rest of the room. On the far wall, something caught the light. A piece of paper, pinned crookedly, edges curled from age. Caleb walked over and pulled it free carefully. A map. Old. Faded. But still readable. He held it up near the window where the light was stronger. The outline showed the ridge, the road leading up, and several branching paths that no longer existed, or at least weren't visible from where he'd come in. Most of them were marked with simple lines. One of them had been scratched out, not erased. Scratched. Repeatedly. Caleb's thumb traced the mark without touching it directly. Whoever had done it hadn't been careful. It wasn't about hiding the line. It was about making sure no one followed it. Rexley let out a low sound behind him. Not a growl. A warning. Caleb turned immediately, map still in hand. The dog stood facing the back of the room again, body tense, ears locked forward. Same direction, same general area as before. The floor. Caleb walked back slowly, stopping a few feet short this time. He didn't crouch, didn't reach for it, just watched. The silence in the room deepened, pressing in around them. Then, a faint shift. So slight it could have been the wood settling, but Caleb felt it more than heard it. His breathing slowed. 1, 2, 3. He angled his body slightly, positioning himself between Rexley and the rest of the room without making it obvious. Stay, he whispered. Rexley didn't move. Caleb's eyes flicked once toward the door, then back to the floor, the hollow space beneath it, the disturbed ground outside, the scratched-out path on the map. None of it lined up clean. Not yet. But it was starting to form a shape, and shapes like that usually meant one thing. Someone had known. Someone had come back. And someone might still be. The wind pressed harder against the walls, rattling something loose above them. A soft creak echoed through the ceiling beams. Caleb didn't look up, didn't break focus. Because whatever this place was hiding, it wasn't done revealing itself, and neither was he. Caleb stayed where he was, eyes fixed on the floor, listening past the silence. Nothing moved, no second sound, no shift of weight, no breath that didn't belong. Still, his shoulders didn't relax. They never did when something felt unfinished. Rexley held position a few feet away, body angled slightly toward the door now, splitting his attention between inside and out. The dog's instincts were sharper than any early warning system Caleb had ever trusted. That was enough. Caleb straightened slowly, folding the map once, then again, before sliding it into his jacket. He didn't want it left out. Not here, not where someone else might already know to look. Let's get eyes outside, he said quietly. Rexley moved first. The dog slipped through the doorway and onto the porch without hesitation. Caleb followed, stepping out into the cold light again, scanning wide this time, not just near. The mountain felt different now, less empty. He moved down the steps and onto the dirt path, boots crunching softly. This time he didn't circle close. He pushed farther out, widening his perimeter, checking angles from a distance. 10 yards, 20, 30. From here, the station looked smaller, more exposed, too exposed. Caleb crouched near a patch of gravel and studied the ground. Tire marks, old, faint, probably from before the auction. Hard to tell. Then something else. A fresher line. Not deep. Not obvious. But there. He leaned closer, tracing it with his eyes. Recent. Not this morning, but not weeks ago either. Rexley gave a low huff from behind him. Caleb stood. Yeah, he murmured. Someone had been here. Maybe before him. Maybe after. The thought settled in quietly, like a weight he didn't need but carried anyway. He turned back toward the station and froze. At the far end of the dirt road, beyond the tree line, something moved. A shape, dark, low, coming in slow. Caleb didn't step forward, didn't step back. He just watched. The shape grew larger, steady, controlled, engine sound barely reaching him through the wind. Vehicle. SUV. Black. Clean. Too clean for this road. Rexley's ears went up sharply. The dog stepped forward, placing himself just ahead of Caleb, body stiff, tail low. Caleb's eyes narrowed. No hesitation. No uncertainty. This wasn't someone lost. This was someone coming here on purpose. The SUV rolled closer, tires pressing into dirt that hadn't been touched much lately. It didn't speed up, didn't slow down. Confident, like it already knew where it was going. Caleb shifted slightly, adjusting his stance. Not aggressive, not open either. Balanced, ready. The vehicle came to a stop about 20 feet from the station. Engine idling. No dust cloud. No reckless braking. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Mid-40s, maybe. Clean jacket. Dark jeans. Boots that hadn't seen much of this terrain. He closed the door without slamming it and looked up at the station like he was inspecting something he already owned. Then his eyes landed on Caleb. A smile followed. Polite, practiced. Didn't expect anyone to be up here this early, the man said, voice easy, carrying just enough. Caleb didn't answer right away. He let the silence sit. Let the man fill it if he wanted. Rexley didn't move, didn't bark, just watched. The man stepped forward a few paces, hands visible, posture relaxed. Name's Derek Voss, he said. I've got some property down the ridge. Caleb's gaze dropped for a second. Shoes. No dust, no mud. Not from around here. He looked back up. Caleb, he said simply. Derek nodded, like that confirmed something. I heard about the auction, Derek continued. Didn't think anyone would actually take that place. His eyes drifted over the building again, slower this time, more deliberate. Then I heard someone did. Caleb stayed still. Word travels fast, he said. Derek smiled again. Up here? Faster than you'd think. There was a pause. The wind moved between them, carrying the scent of pine and cold stone. Then Derek reached into his jacket and pulled out a card. I'll get straight to it, he said. I'm interested in buying the property. He held the card out, but didn't step closer. Cash, he added. Today. Caleb didn't take the card, didn't look at it. He looked at Derek instead. Long enough to make it uncomfortable. Why? Caleb asked. Simple. Direct. Derek's smile didn't fade, but it shifted. Expansion, he said. I've got plans for the area. That building's right in the middle of it. Caleb glanced back at the station. then at the road behind Derek. No other vehicles, no backup. But that didn't mean much. He looked down again at Derek's boots. Still clean. Didn't match the road he'd just driven. "You didn't come up from the main road," Caleb said quietly. Derek paused, just for a fraction of a second. Then the smile came back. "There's more than one way up here," he replied. Caleb didn't respond. Didn't need to. Rexley shifted slightly, stepping closer to Caleb's side, body angled toward Derek now. Not aggressive, just present. Derek noticed. His eyes dropped briefly to the dog, then back up. "Good dog," he said. Rexley didn't react, didn't blink. Derek cleared his throat lightly. "Look," he continued, tone still smooth. "You made a good deal at the auction. I'm offering you a better one." He lifted the card slightly again. "Easy money. No headaches fixing that place up." Caleb's jaw tightened just a little. He thought of the hollow sound beneath the floor, the map in his jacket, the disturbed ground out back, the tire marks, the way Rexley had stood there all night, staring at the same spot like it mattered. He looked back at Derek. "No," he said. The word landed flat. "Final." Derek held the silence for a moment, then lowered the card slowly. "Didn't even ask how much," he said, almost amused. Caleb didn't move. "Doesn't matter," he replied. The wind picked up again, brushing through the trees behind them. Derek studied him now, not smiling as much, measuring, recalculating. Then he slipped the card back into his jacket. "All right," he said. "Your call." He turned slightly, glancing once more at the station. Something in his expression shifted there, subtle but real. Interest, not in the building, in something else. He looked back at Caleb. "If you change your mind," he said, "I won't be hard to find." Caleb didn't answer. Derek nodded once like he expected that, then walked back to the SUV. The engine revved softly. The vehicle turned slowly, heading back down the same narrow path it came from. Within seconds, it disappeared behind the trees. Gone. Just like that. The mountain fell quiet again, but it didn't feel empty anymore. Caleb stood there for a long moment, watching the road long after the SUV had vanished. Rexley let out a low breath, then turned and looked straight back at the station, at the floor. Caleb followed his gaze. The hollow space beneath the boards, the map in his pocket, the man who showed up too fast. Pieces, not connected yet, but getting there. He exhaled slowly and started back toward the building. "Yeah," he said under his breath. "This just got bigger." Caleb didn't go back to the floor right away. Instead, he stood just inside the doorway, letting his eyes adjust again. Not to the dark this time, but to the details he'd missed before. Everything looked the same. That was the problem. Places like this didn't stay untouched by accident. Not this long, not this clean. He closed the door behind him slowly, easing it into place until the latch caught with a soft click. The sound carried farther than it should have. Rexley moved past him, straight to the same spot near the floor, but this time he didn't scratch. He circled once, then stopped and sat, watching, waiting again. Caleb exhaled slowly and stepped toward the ticket counter. If someone wanted this place, he murmured, they wouldn't start with the walls. He crouched behind the counter, running his hand along the wood, feeling for irregularities. Dust coated most surfaces evenly, but there were breaks in it, thin lines, faint arcs, like something had been moved and then set back. Not recently, but not untouched either. He pulled open one of the drawers. It stuck halfway. He didn't force it. Instead, he lifted slightly, adjusting the angle until the warped wood gave just enough to slide open with a low groan. Inside, Paper. Old. Stacked. Bound with a thin cord that had nearly turned to dust. Caleb hesitated before touching it. Paper meant records. Records meant someone cared enough to write things down, and sometimes cared enough to hide them. He slipped 2 fingers under the stack and lifted it carefully onto the counter. The pages shifted, brittle but intact. Rexley stood and moved closer, nose hovering just above the edge. "Easy," Caleb said. He untied the cord slowly. The top page crumbled slightly at the corner when he turned it, but the ink held. Names, dates, destinations, handwritten, clean, ordered. Caleb leaned closer, reading line by line. Willow Creek to Red Hollow, Willow Creek to Silver Bend, Willow Creek to... He stopped. Something didn't line up. He flipped back a page, then forward again. The numbers, ticket numbers, ran in sequence, but the names didn't. Some were missing entirely. Not crossed out. Not erased. Just gone. He frowned slightly, tracing a blank space between 2 entries. "That's not how records work," he muttered. Even bad record-keeping followed patterns. This didn't. This was intentional. Rexley let out a soft breath beside him, then turned suddenly and walked toward the back wall. Caleb looked up. The dog's pace had changed, more direct now, purposeful. He followed. Rexley stopped near the same section of wall Caleb had noticed earlier, the one that didn't quite match the rest. But instead of the wall, the dog lowered his nose to the floor just beside it. A different spot. Not the hollow one from before. Caleb crouched again, this time faster. "Show me," he said quietly. Rexley pawed once. Light. Controlled. Caleb brushed away the thin layer of dust with his hand. Wood. Then a seam. Narrow. Almost invisible unless you knew where to look. He pressed down. Nothing. Shifted his weight. Pressed again. A faint give. His eyes narrowed. "Not built the same," he murmured. He glanced back at the papers on the counter, then at the floor, then at the door. Everything connected now, just not in a straight line. He slid his fingers into the seam and pulled. The board resisted, then lifted. Just enough. Beneath it, a dark gap. Not deep, but deliberate. Caleb reached in slowly, feeling along the edges first. No wires, no sharp metal, just space. His fingers brushed against something soft. Leather. He tightened his grip and pulled it free. A small pouch, dust-covered but intact. Rexley leaned in immediately, sniffing hard, then pulling back with a quiet huff. Old, but important. Caleb set the pouch on the counter and wiped his hands on his jeans before opening it. The leather cracked slightly at the fold, but held. Inside, more paper, smaller, folded tighter. He unfolded the first piece carefully. A map, different from the one he'd found on the wall. This one was hand-drawn, less polished, more urgent. The lines were rough, but clear enough. A route leading away from the station, up into the mountains, deeper than the main trail. And then nothing. No endpoint. No return path. Caleb's eyes scanned it again. Dead end, he said. But it didn't feel like one. Rexley shifted again, restless now, pacing once before stopping at the door. Caleb picked up another paper from the pouch. This one wasn't a map. It was a list. Short, just a handful of names. Some of them matched the ledger. Some didn't. He looked back at the book, flipping pages quickly now, comparing. The missing entries, the blank spaces, they lined up. Exactly. These people, he said quietly. Rexley let out a low sound, not quite a growl. Caleb looked down at the list again. No dates, no destinations, just names, and a symbol next to each one. A small mark. Simple. Repeated. He'd seen it before. On the scratched-out path. On the second map. Same shape. Same intent. He leaned back slightly, eyes drifting toward the door where Rexley stood. Then to the wall. Then to the floor. A pattern forming now. Not random. Not abandoned. Hidden. The wind pressed hard against the station again, rattling something loose near the roof. Caleb didn't flinch. His focus stayed on the papers, on the names that weren't supposed to exist. Someone erased them, he said. Rexley turned his head slightly, ears forward. Caleb folded the papers carefully and slid them back into the pouch. Then he tucked the pouch inside his jacket. Close. Not leaving it behind. Not anymore. He stood slowly, scanning the room again. Everything felt tighter now, closer, like the walls had shifted just enough to remind him he wasn't the first one to find this, and maybe not the last. Rexley stepped back from the door, then turned and looked straight at Caleb, not at the floor this time, at him. Caleb held that look, then nodded once. Yeah, he said quietly. We're not alone in this. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was waiting. Caleb didn't move. Not right away. He stood in the middle of the station, the leather pouch tucked inside his jacket, the weight of it pressing faintly against his ribs like a second heartbeat. Rexley had gone still again. Not alert the way he had been before. This was different. Quieter. Listening. Caleb turned his head slightly, eyes drifting toward the door, then the windows, then the ceiling beams. He let the room settle into him, every creak, every shift of wood, every whisper of wind. Nothing obvious. That was what made it worse. All right, he said softly. We move smart. He crossed the room slowly and picked up the ledger, flipping it closed with care. Then he slid it back into the drawer, but not the same way it had been before, just enough off to tell if someone touched it. Then he moved to the door, opened it, stepped outside. The light had shifted. Late afternoon now. Shadows stretched longer across the clearing, pulling the station into the trees like it was trying to disappear. Rexley stepped out ahead of him, nose already low, tracking. Caleb didn't follow immediately. He listened first. Then he stepped out and closed the door behind him, leaving it just shy of fully latched. Trap. If it moved, he'd know. He circled wide this time, not hugging the walls, but moving outward into the tree line. Each step placed carefully, avoiding loose branches, loose gravel, anything that would speak for him. Rexley moved like he'd done it before. Because he had. They stopped near the back of the building. The disturbed patch of dirt was still there. But now, there was more. Caleb crouched low, eyes narrowing. 2 sets of tracks, not old, not yesterday, fresh enough that the edges hadn't softened yet. Boot prints, different sizes, different tread. He followed them with his eyes, not moving yet. They came from the ridge, down toward the station, then stopped, right near the wall, not scattered, not wandering, focused, searching. Caleb's jaw tightened. They were here, he whispered. Rexley gave a low, steady growl this time. Not loud, but certain. Caleb lifted his head slowly and looked toward the ridge. Same place he'd marked earlier. Same line of sight. Whoever had stood there had been watching, and they'd come down. He rose slowly, scanning again, this time higher, deeper into the trees. Nothing moved, no glint of glass, no shadow out of place. But that didn't mean they were gone. It just meant they were better. Inside, Caleb said quietly. Rexley didn't hesitate. They moved back to the station, Caleb stepping slightly off the previous tracks, not retracing steps, not leaving a clean pattern behind. He reached the door and paused. It hadn't moved. Still slightly open. Still where he left it. He listened, then pushed it open and stepped inside, Rexley close behind. The air felt different, not warmer, not colder, just used. Caleb closed the door behind them and locked it this time. Slow, silent. Then he turned. Nothing was out of place. The counter, the benches, the wall, the floor. Everything exactly as it had been, except Rexley moved again, straight to the back, to the wall, then lower, to the floor. Not the loose board. The other one. The one Caleb had opened. The dog sniffed hard, then pulled back slightly, ears tilting. Caleb stepped closer. He crouched, looked. The seam was still there. The board still slightly lifted from where he'd opened it earlier. But the dust had shifted. Barely. Just enough. His hand hovered over it. Didn't touch. Didn't need to. Someone had been here. After him, after he left. After he found the pouch. Rexley let out a sharper growl now, low in his chest. Caleb's eyes lifted instantly. Easy, he whispered. But his own body had already changed. Weight forward, breath controlled, every muscle tuned. He stood slowly and turned toward the rest of the room, eyes moving faster now, sharper, looking for what didn't belong. A mark, a shift, a shadow, anything. The wind hit the side of the building hard, rattling the boards, and for a split second, Caleb dropped. Flat, instinct, pure, uncontrolled. The world snapped sideways. His shoulder hit the floor, breath gone for half a beat as his hands moved, searching, gripping. Nothing. No weapon. No cover. Just wood. Dust. And silence. His chest rose once, twice. Then he forced it down. Forced it slow, 1, 2, 3. The room came back. The station. The dog. Rexley stood over him now, not panicked, just watching, waiting for him to come back. Caleb blinked once, then pushed himself up, slower this time, more controlled. Yeah, he muttered. I'm here. He stayed crouched for a second longer, letting the edges settle. Then he stood, looked at the floor again, at the shifted dust, at the open seam, at the space beneath. They know, he said quietly. Rexley's ears twitched. Caleb's gaze moved toward the door, then the windows, then back to the ridge. Whoever had come here hadn't found what they were looking for. Not yet. But they were close. Too close. And now so was he. The station creaked softly as the temperature dropped again, the light fading fast outside. Night was coming, and Caleb knew one thing for certain. They would come back. Night settled fast in the mountains. By the time the last light slipped behind the ridge, the station had already gone cold again. Shadows stretched across the floor, swallowing corners, turning familiar shapes into something else. Caleb didn't light a fire, didn't risk the glow. Instead, he sat on the floor with his back against the wall, angled toward the door, eyes half-lidded but awake. Rexley lay a few feet ahead, positioned where he could see both the entrance and the back of the room. They didn't speak, didn't move much, just waited. The wind pushed harder now, slipping through cracks, brushing against the loose boards. It carried sound in strange ways, stretching it, bending it, making distance hard to judge. That was when Caleb heard it. A faint metallic clink. Soft. Out of place. His body reacted before his mind did. He dropped. Flat to the floor, shoulder hitting hard, breath cutting short as his hand had moved instinctively, one reaching forward, the other pulling back, searching for space, for cover, for nothing. Just wood. Dust. Dark. The sound came again, closer this time. Metal against stone. His pulse spiked. Not here. Not now. But his body didn't care. The station disappeared, replaced by something else. Heat. Noise. The smell of burnt air. Afghanistan. The memory hit like it always did, without warning, without mercy. A narrow alley. Broken walls. Voices in a language he didn't understand, but knew well enough to fear. "Contact left!" The shout echoed through his head, not the room. Gunfire cracked sharp against stone, rounds snapping past, too close, too fast. Caleb pressed himself lower, heart pounding, breath shallow, eyes searching for movement that wasn't there, wasn't real. His hand clenched into the floor, fingers digging into wood that felt like gravel, like dust, like Caleb. The voice cut through, not loud, not panicked, just steady. He blinked. The heat faded. The noise collapsed into silence. The alley dissolved, replaced by the station, by cold, by darkness, by Rexley. The dog stood over him now, head low, eyes locked on his face. Not barking, not whining, just there, grounding him. Caleb sucked in a breath through his nose, held it, then let it out slowly. 1, 2, 3. He rolled onto his side, then pushed himself up, slower this time. "Yeah," he whispered. "I'm here." Rexley stayed close, pressing lightly against his shoulder before stepping back into position. Caleb sat there for a moment, breathing steady now, letting the last of the memory drain away. The station creaked softly around him. No gunfire, no voices, just wind. He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again, sharper this time. Focused. "Not that place," he muttered. "Not anymore." He pushed himself to his feet and moved toward the door. Careful, controlled, every step placed with intention. He stopped just short of the entrance, listening. Nothing. Then, a faint crunch. Outside. Gravel. Rexley's ears snapped forward instantly, body stiff, a low growl building deep in his chest. Caleb raised a hand slightly. Easy. The growl stopped, but the tension stayed. Caleb shifted his position, stepping off to the side of the door instead of standing in front of it. He pressed his back lightly against the wall, angling his body to reduce exposure. Old training. Still there. Still useful. Another crunch. Closer. Then silence. Whoever it was, they were careful. Caleb's eyes flicked once to the window, then back to the door. No shadows passed, no movement, just presence. He reached down slowly and picked up a loose piece of wood from the floor, a broken slat from one of the benches. Not much, but enough. Rexley moved a step forward, positioning himself just behind Caleb's leg, ready. The air tightened. Seconds stretched. Then, A soft brush against the door. Not a knock, not force, just contact, testing. Caleb didn't move, didn't breathe. The handle shifted slightly, stopped. Silence again. Longer this time. Then the pressure lifted. Footsteps retreated. 1, 2, 3. Fading. Gone. Caleb stayed where he was for a full minute after the last sound disappeared. Then another. Only when the wind filled the silence again did he move. He stepped forward and opened the door just enough to look out. Dark. Empty. The tree line stood still, but the ground told a different story. Fresh prints, right up to the door. Then turning away. They hadn't tried to break in, not yet. They were checking, confirming. Caleb closed the door slowly and locked it again. He turned back into the room, eyes moving across every surface, every corner. "They're getting closer," he said quietly. Rexley let out a low breath. Caleb looked down at the spot in the floor. The hollow space, the hidden pouch now inside his jacket, the names that didn't exist, and the map that led somewhere no one wanted followed. All of it connected now. Not clear, but connected. He moved back to the wall and sat down again, this time closer to the door. Rexley settled beside him, but didn't lie down. Not fully, not relaxed. Caleb rested a hand on the dog's neck, fingers pressing lightly into the fur. Warm, real here. He stared into the dark, eyes steady now, waiting. Because whoever had come tonight would come again, and next time, they wouldn't just test the door. Caleb didn't sleep, not even close. The night stretched long and thin, every sound carrying weight. The wind scraped along the walls like fingers searching for a way in, and every shift of wood pulled his attention back to the same question. How long had they been watching? By the time the sky softened into gray, Caleb was already on his feet. Rexley hadn't moved far either. The dog stood near the center of the room, head low, eyes tracking Caleb as he walked back toward the counter. "Daylight changes things," Caleb muttered, but not enough. He crouched again near the floor, studying the loose board, the seam, the disturbed dust. Then he looked up, past it, to the wall, the same one, the one that never quite felt right. Yesterday, he'd noticed it. Today, he measured it. He stood, stepped back, and counted the distance from the counter to the wall. 1, 2, 3, 4. He turned and walked the outside line in his mind, remembering the shape of the building from the night before. The numbers didn't match. Not by much, but enough. Caleb exhaled slowly. "Something's off," he said. Rexley's ears lifted. Caleb moved closer to the wall, running his hand across the surface again. The wood felt solid, too solid compared to the rest of the station. Less warped, less aged, like it had been protected, or built later. He knocked once. Solid. Lower. Same. Then he shifted slightly to the right. Knocked again. The sound changed. Just enough. Caleb's eyes narrowed. "There you are." Rexley stepped in beside him, nose brushing the wood, then dropping lower to the base. The dog pawed once, right where the sound shifted. Caleb crouched immediately. He brushed away dust along the baseboard, fingers moving carefully this time, slower than before. The seam wasn't obvious, but it was there. A faint line running vertical instead of horizontal. Not a natural join. A break. His hand moved to the edge, pressing lightly. Nothing. He adjusted his angle. Pressed again. A slight give. Not much. but real. Caleb leaned back, scanning the rest of the wall, looking for symmetry, patterns, mistakes. His eyes landed on a narrow wooden shelf mounted just above knee height. Out of place. Too low to be useful. Too centered to be random. He reached up and touched it. It didn't budge. But the brackets, they weren't metal. They were wood. Old pegs, hand-carved, different from the nails used everywhere else. Caleb's jaw tightened. Whoever built this, he said quietly, wanted it quiet. Rexley huffed once, as if agreeing. Caleb pulled his pocket knife from his jacket and slid the blade carefully under one of the pegs. He didn't force it, just applied steady pressure. The peg shifted, slowly, then came loose. He set it aside, did the same with the second, the third, the fourth. Each one loosened with the same resistance, tight, but not permanent. The shelf sagged slightly. Caleb caught it before it dropped, lowering it carefully to the floor without a sound. Behind it, nothing obvious, just wall, but cleaner, untouched by dust. He leaned in closer, ran his fingers along the surface, found it. A slight edge, a hidden line. His hand pressed flat against it. He pushed. Nothing. Pulled. Still nothing. Rexley stepped forward, nose pressing against the lower corner, then pulling back sharply, ears snapping forward. Caleb shifted his grip, pressed inward again, then down. The panel moved, just a fraction. Enough. He adjusted his hold and pulled again, this time with a different angle. The wood gave, slow, reluctant. Then, it opened. A narrow gap appeared, no wider than a shoulder. Cold air slipped out, carrying a smell that didn't belong to the rest of the station. Not rot, not dust, something older, sealed. Caleb froze for half a second, letting the air settle. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flashlight. Didn't turn it on right away. He listened first. Nothing. No movement. No breath. Just silence. Rexley stepped closer, body tight, eyes locked on the opening. "Stay close," Caleb whispered. He clicked the light on. A narrow beam cut through the darkness inside. A small space. Hidden. Deliberate. The walls inside were intact, cleaner than the rest of the station, untouched by time in the same way. A room. Not storage. Not random. Built. Caleb stepped forward slowly and slipped through the opening. Rexley followed immediately, pressing in behind him. The space was tight, but not cramped. A table stood against the far wall. Shelves lined one side. And everything was still there. Untouched. A layer of dust rested over it all, but nothing had been disturbed. Not like the main room, not like the floor. This place had been sealed, forgotten, or protected. Caleb moved forward carefully, sweeping the light across the surfaces. Books, ledgers, tools, a coat hanging on a hook, stiff with age, and on the table, a photograph. He stepped closer, picked it up, wiped the surface lightly with his sleeve. A woman stood in front of the station, hand resting on the same counter Caleb had been searching. Her eyes were steady, direct, like she knew something no one else did. Caleb stared at it for a moment, then lowered it slowly. Rexley moved past him, sniffing along the shelves, then stopping near the far corner. He pawed once, soft, controlled. Caleb turned the light toward him. There, another marking, carved into the wood. The same symbol, the one from the map, from the list. Repeated. Caleb stepped closer, tracing it lightly with his fingers. Not random, he whispered. The room felt heavier now. Not dangerous, but important. Like stepping into something that had been waiting for the right moment to be found. Caleb turned slowly, scanning the space again. Then he looked back toward the opening, toward the main room, toward the station, toward the world outside. They didn't find this, he said quietly. Rexley looked up at him. Caleb nodded once. But they're looking. The beam of light shifted slightly in his hand as he took another step deeper into the hidden room. Because whatever this place was, it wasn't just hiding something. It was pointing somewhere. And now, he was inside it. Caleb didn't move for a long moment. Not out of fear, out of habit. You don't rush a room you don't understand. The beam of his flashlight drifted slowly, deliberately, left to right, floor to ceiling, corners last. He checked for movement first, then disturbances, then patterns. Nothing shifted, nothing breathed, just stillness. Rexley stepped ahead of him, slow and silent, nose low, tail steady, not wagging, not tucked, focused, clear. Caleb followed, each step placed carefully, heel barely touching before weight shifted forward. The floor here didn't creak the same way. It held, solid, different construction, deliberate. He reached the table first, ran his fingers across the surface. Dust lifted, thin and dry, untouched for years. No recent prints, no smears. Whoever came last, they never found this room. Caleb angled the light down. Ledgers, 3 of them, stacked, tied with a strip of old leather. He didn't open them yet. Instead, he scanned the rest of the room. Shelves lined with folded papers. Maps. Not decorative, functional. His pulse shifted, not faster, but tighter. This wasn't storage. This was planning. Rexley stopped at the far wall again. The same spot. The dog didn't bark, didn't growl, just stood there, ears forward, breathing slow, nose catching something Caleb couldn't yet see. Caleb stepped closer. The wall looked solid at first glance. Same wood, same age. But the pattern didn't match. The grain ran differently. And the nails, there weren't any. Caleb leaned in, bringing the light lower. There it was, a series of shallow carvings, almost invisible under time. Lines, angles, not random. He'd seen patterns like that before. Roots, field markings, not military, but similar thinking. Someone mapped this, he murmured. Rexley pawed once at the base, then again, harder this time. Caleb crouched. He brushed away more dust. The floor met the wall at a tight seam, but right where Rexley pointed, there was a gap, thin, hidden. Caleb set the flashlight down, angled upward. He pressed along the seam, felt resistance, then a slight give. He shifted his grip, pulled. The lower panel slid inward, just enough to reveal a narrow slot. Cold air pushed through, stronger this time, moving, not trapped, connected. Caleb stilled. Air doesn't move in sealed spaces. It moves when there's somewhere to go. He looked at Rexley. The dog was already staring into the gap, waiting. Caleb widened the opening carefully. The panel didn't creak. It moved like it had been used before, on purpose. Behind it, darkness, not a room, a passage, narrow, barely wide enough to crawl through. The air that came from it carried something else now. Earth, stone, cold water, outside. Caleb exhaled slowly. No way this stops here, he whispered. Rexley stepped forward immediately. Caleb caught his collar. Hold. The dog froze. Obedient, Caleb leaned closer to the opening, angling the light deeper inside. The beam stretched forward, 10 feet, 15, then curved, out of sight, not a dead end, a route. Caleb sat back on his heels, mind working, fast, hidden room, false wall, now a passage, not for storage, not for hiding objects, for movement, people, quiet, unseen. He reached back to the table, grabbed one of the maps, and brought it into the light, unfolded it carefully. The paper crackled but held. Lines, hand-drawn, the same symbols carved into the wall, the same pattern. Except now, it made sense. He traced one line with his finger. From the station, outward, into the mountains. No marked destination, no return path. Just a one-way route. Caleb's jaw tightened. Not transport, he said quietly. Extraction. Rexley looked back at him, ears twitching. Caleb folded the map slowly. His mind pulled pieces together. Missing names, hidden routes, a sealed room no one found, and now, a path that led out without ever being recorded. They weren't moving goods, he said. They were moving people. Rexley huffed once, low, agreeing. Caleb looked back at the opening, the passage, then toward the door of the hidden room, then beyond that, to the empty station, and the men who had come in the night. They're not guessing, Caleb said. They're following something. His grip tightened on the map. And they're close. Rexley shifted beside him, muscles tightening, body angled toward the passage now. Ready, waiting for the command. Caleb looked at him, then back at the darkness ahead. Decision made. He reached down, grabbed his flashlight, and clipped it tighter to his hand. Checked the angle, checked the beam. Then he leaned forward, shoulders lowering, body aligning with the narrow opening. Stay on me, he said. Rexley didn't hesitate. Caleb took one last breath, then slid into the passage. The light cut forward into the dark, and the station, for the first time, felt like the beginning of something. Not the end. The tunnel tightened around Caleb's shoulders as he moved forward. One arm stretched ahead, the other pulling him through inch by inch. Dirt pressed against his jacket. Old wood scraped softly along his back. Rexley stayed close behind, breath steady, claws finding grip without slipping. No sound but their movement. No wind now, just the beam of light cutting a narrow path through packed earth and stone. Caleb paused at the bend. Listened. Nothing. He angled the light forward again. The tunnel widened. Not by much, but enough. Enough to kneel. Then crouch. Then finally, stand. He stepped out into open space. The shift hit him first. Air. Real air. Cold, clean, moving. Mountain air. He turned the light slowly. Stone walls rose on both sides, jagged and natural. The passage had opened into a narrow canyon, hidden deep between cliffs that blocked most of the sky. The stars above were thin, just slivers between rock. Rexley emerged beside him, shaking off dust, then immediately scanning the area. Alert. Alive. Caleb stepped forward carefully, boots crunching lightly over gravel. He dropped into a crouch and ran his hand over the ground. Tracks. Old, but not ancient. Boot marks. Different sizes. Different directions. Some faded. Some not. He leaned closer. Recent. Days. Maybe less. Caleb's jaw set. They've been here, he said quietly. Rexley let out a low, tight growl. Not loud. Focused. Caleb followed his gaze. Ahead. Deeper into the pass. He moved forward again, slower now. Every step measured, every shadow checked. The canyon curved slightly, opening just enough to reveal shapes ahead. Man-made, low, rough, shelter. Caleb stopped behind a rock outcrop, dropped low, and observed. 3 structures, not buildings, more like temporary stations. Wood frames, weathered, covered once maybe, but now mostly exposed. A fire pit in the center. Cold, long dead. But the arrangement, it wasn't random. It was organized, functional, like a waypoint, not a destination. Caleb's breathing slowed, controlled. He scanned the perimeter. High ground, entry points, exit routes. There, a narrow split further ahead, almost invisible. Another path leading deeper into the mountains. Rexley shifted beside him. Then suddenly, the dog stiffened, ears locked, body forward. Caleb froze, listened. At first, nothing. Then a faint sound. Metal. Distant. Not natural. Caleb's hand instinctively moved to where his sidearm used to be. Empty. He adjusted instead, lowering his profile, shifting closer to cover. Contact, he whispered under his breath. Rexley didn't move, didn't blink. The sound came again. Closer now. Footsteps. 2. Different weight. Different rhythm. Caleb's mind mapped it instantly. 2 men, one heavier, one lighter, moving cautiously. Not lost, not wandering. They knew this place. Caleb exhaled slowly, then reached for Rexley's collar, pulled him back. Just enough. Stay hidden. The footsteps approached the open space. Voices now. Low. Caleb couldn't catch the words, but the tone. Frustrated. Searching. One of them kicked something. Wood cracked. Nothing here, a voice muttered. The other didn't answer, just kept moving. Caleb stayed still, counted seconds, tracked movement by sound alone. They circled, checked the structures. One of them stepped closer. Too close. Caleb pressed himself tighter against the rock. Rexley's breathing slowed even further, trained instinct taking over, invisible. The man stopped, right there, 10 feet away. Caleb could see his boots now, dust-covered, worn, not new like before. Different men, or same team, different role. The man turned slightly. Light from his handheld flashlight swept across the ground, closer, closer, then past. Caleb didn't move, didn't breathe. Seconds stretched, then a sudden crack. Gunfire, sharp, echoing through the canyon. Rexley jerked. A sharp yelp cut through the silence. Caleb's world snapped into motion. He grabbed Rexley, pulling him tight into cover as another shot echoed, higher this time, blind. Easy, easy, Caleb whispered, hands already moving. Blood, front leg, grazed, not deep but bleeding. Rexley trembled once, then stilled, eyes locked on Caleb, still present, still ready. Caleb pressed his hand over the wound, applying pressure. "Stay with me," he murmured. The footsteps shifted. Panic now. The shooters hadn't expected resistance. Or maybe they hadn't expected anything at all. "Did you hit it?" one voice called. "Don't know, something moved." Caleb's eyes narrowed. Amateurs, not soldiers, but dangerous enough. He didn't fire back, didn't reveal position. Instead, he waited, counted again. tracked their movement as they pulled back, uncertain. Minutes passed, then silence. Real silence this time. Caleb stayed still long after the last sound faded. Then slowly, he exhaled, looked down at Rexley. The dog's breathing steadied under his hand, eyes still sharp, still there. "Good boy," Caleb whispered. Rexley's tail gave the faintest movement. Caleb leaned back against the rock, scanning the canyon one more time. The structures, the path deeper into the mountains, the hidden route. And now, gunfire. People searching. Not for land. Not for ruins. For something else. Something they hadn't found yet. Caleb looked toward the narrow path ahead, then back at the tunnel behind them. His grip tightened. "This isn't over," he said quietly. Rexley didn't need to answer. He already knew. Caleb stayed low until the cold seeped through his knees and into his bones. Only then did he move. Slow, controlled. He checked the canyon one more time. High ground, shadows, the narrow split deeper into the pass. Clear. For now. He shifted closer to Rexley, tightening the wrap around the dog's leg, using a strip torn from his own sleeve. The bleeding had slowed. Not clean, but not life-threatening. "Still in the fight," Caleb murmured. Rexley blinked once. Steady. No panic. Just waiting. Caleb exhaled, then looked back toward the tunnel. Going deeper into the pass would be a mistake. Not tonight. Not with unknown shooters and no advantage. He made the call. "We pull back." Rexley didn't resist. They moved together, low, quiet, retracing their path through the canyon, back toward the narrow tunnel mouth hidden in shadow. Caleb paused at the entrance. Listened. Nothing followed. Still, he didn't trust it. He slid inside first, pulling himself through the tight passage, Rexley close behind. The darkness swallowed them again, the cold air awoken fading as they crawled back toward the station. When Caleb finally pushed through the hidden panel into the room, it felt different, not safe, just familiar. He closed the panel behind them, resetting it carefully, leaving no sign it had been disturbed. Then he moved to the main room. Didn't turn on the light. Didn't need to. He knew every corner now. Caleb sat at the old ticket counter, Rexley lying beside him, breathing slow. The silence returned. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was full. Of pieces. Caleb reached for the maps, spread them out. Then the old tickets. Then the notes. He didn't rush. He let it come together. Pattern by pattern. The scratched-out names. The hidden routes. The concealed room. The passage into the mountains. And now people searching for it. Not for money. Not for land. For something that had been hidden on purpose. Caleb leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. They weren't hiding from time, he said quietly. They were hiding from someone. Rexley's ears twitched. Caleb picked up one of the old tickets again. A name scratched out. Not faded. Deliberate. Removed. But the number, still there. Always there. He grabbed the map again, tracing the route with his finger. From the station, into the pass. No return. No loop. One direction. One purpose. Extraction. His chest tightened slightly, not from fear, but recognition. He'd seen this before. Different place. Different war. Same idea. Move people quietly. Keep records separate. Protect identities until they're out. Until they're safe. Caleb's hand stilled. Then slowly, he understood. They weren't missing, he said. They were erased. Rexley shifted beside him. Caleb looked down at the dog. Not to disappear, he added. To survive. The words settled into the room like weight. Everything changed. The station wasn't abandoned. It had been shut down. Closed on purpose. The hidden room wasn't storage. It was control. The passage wasn't escape. It was a route. A lifeline. Caleb stood up slowly, walking the length of the room, seeing it differently now. The counter, the walls, the floor. Every inch of it had been built with intention. Not for business. For protection. He stopped at the loose board. The same spot Rexley had found. The hollow sound. Caleb crouched and pulled it free again. Reached inside. The leather pouch still there. Untouched. He opened it. Carefully this time. Inside. More than just tickets. Folded paper. Thin. Fragile. He unfolded one. Names. Clear. Not scratched out. Written carefully. Beside each, marks. Small notes. Dates. Directions. Some with symbols that matched the map. Caleb's breath slowed. This is it, he whispered. Rexley lifted his head. Caleb looked at the list again. These weren't passengers. They were people being moved, protected, families, names that had been removed from official records, but preserved here. Hidden. Safe. Caleb folded the paper back slowly, his mind already moving ahead. Derek Voss. The men in the canyon. They weren't guessing. They knew something was here. But not what. Not yet. Caleb stood. Decision made. He gathered the maps, the notes, the list. Not to hide them. To protect them properly. Not alone. Not like this. He glanced toward the door. Morning would come soon, and when it did, he wouldn't handle this the way he used to. Not alone in the dark. Not watching shadows. He looked down at Rexley. You got me here, he said quietly. The dog's tail moved once. Small. Enough. Caleb turned back toward the station. For the first time since he'd arrived, he didn't check the perimeter, didn't scan the corners, didn't listen for movement. He just stood there. Still. The silence didn't press in anymore. It settled. And for the first time in a long time, Caleb wasn't waiting for something to happen. He already knew what came next. Morning came slow over the Rockies. Cold light spilled through the broken windows, stretching across the worn floorboards like it had 100 years before. Dust drifted in the air, glowing faint in the pale sun. Caleb stood behind the old ticket counter, still. Rexley lay beside him, front leg wrapped, head resting low, but his eyes followed every movement Caleb made. Not weak, just recovering. Caleb picked up the papers again. The list. The names. He ran his thumb along the edge, careful not to crease them. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, he reached for his phone. No signal. He expected that. He didn't curse it, didn't react, just nodded once like confirming a known variable. All right, he said quietly. He moved with purpose now. Packed the documents into a weathered metal box he'd found earlier. Wrapped them in cloth first, then sealed the lid tight. Not hidden. Protected. Different mindset. He glanced at Rexley. "We're taking a trip." The dog didn't stand right away. Caleb walked over, crouched down, checked the bandage. No fresh blood. Good. He slid one arm under Rexley's chest, lifting just enough to help him up. Easy. Rexley steadied himself, then stood fully, limping but stable. They stepped out into the morning. No perimeter check, no scan, just one look at the mountains. Then they moved. The old truck groaned when it started, like it didn't believe it still had a purpose either. Caleb let it idle for a moment, hands resting lightly on the wheel. Then he drove, down the dirt road, out of the silence. The town wasn't far, but it felt like a different world. People, movement, voices. Caleb parked outside the county office, killed the engine, sat there for a second longer. The reflex came back. Scan exits, check mirrors, watch hands. He caught it, stopped it, exhaled, then opened the door. Rexley followed, slower this time but determined. Inside, the office smelled like paper and old coffee. A woman behind the counter looked up. "Can I help you?" Caleb didn't hesitate. "I need to file a historical discovery," he said. She blinked, then nodded slowly. "All right. What kind of discovery?" Caleb set the metal box on the counter, opened it. Carefully. The papers inside didn't look like much, not to anyone who didn't know, but the woman leaned closer. Something in her expression changed. "Where did you find these?" Caleb met her eyes, at the old stagecoach stop outside Willow Ridge. Silence stretched. Then, "Wait here," she said. She disappeared into the back. Caleb stood still. Rexley leaned against his leg. Minutes passed. Then footsteps. More than one. Two officials returned. One older. Glasses. Careful eyes. He approached slowly. "Sir, these documents." Caleb nodded once. "They're real." The man adjusted his glasses, flipping through a few pages. His hands slowed, then stopped. "These names," he whispered. Caleb didn't interrupt, didn't explain. He didn't need to. The evidence spoke. Hours passed. Phones rang. More people came. Archivists. Local historians. Quiet conversations filled the room. No one laughed. No one doubted. Everything was checked. Dates. Ink. Paper. Cross-referenced. Verified. By late afternoon, the tone had changed. Completely. The older man approached Caleb again. "This changes things," he said carefully. Caleb just nodded. "Those land requests out there," the man continued. "Development plans. They're going to stop. Immediately." Caleb didn't react, didn't smile, didn't celebrate. He just looked down at Rexley. The dog's head rested against his leg again. Caleb reached down, scratched behind his ear. "We're done," he said quietly. "Not just about the station. Something else, something deeper." Days later, Caleb stood outside the stagecoach stop again, but it wasn't the same. Markers had been placed. Officials moved around carefully, measuring, documenting, preserving. The place wasn't forgotten anymore. It was protected. Rexley stood beside him, leg healing, still watching everything, still guarding. Caleb looked at the building, the door, the walls, the place that had once felt like a shelter, then a mystery, then a fight. Now something else. He stepped forward, opened the door, walked inside. Sunlight filled the room, clear, warm. For the first time, he didn't notice the shadows, didn't check the corners, didn't listen for danger. He just walked to the counter, rested his hands on the wood, and stood there. Still. The silence felt different now. Not empty, not waiting, just quiet. Rexley lay down beside him. Caleb looked out through the open doorway, at the mountains beyond, at the path they had come from, at the place where people once passed through, trying to disappear, trying to survive. Now, their names would stay. Caleb let out a slow breath. Not heavy, not tense, just steady. He didn't fix everything, didn't change the world, didn't find money or fame. But he found something. A reason to stand still, without expecting the next threat. He reached down, resting a hand on Rexley's back. The dog's tail moved once. Caleb nodded slightly. "Yeah," he said. "This'll do. And maybe that's all any of us are really looking for. Not something perfect. Not something easy, just something that finally feels right." If you made it this far, I'm curious. Drop a 1 in the comments if you think Caleb made the right call staying, or a 0 if you would have walked away from that place for good. And if stories like this stick with you, quiet ones, real ones, go ahead and hit subscribe. There are more stories coming, ones you won't forget.